How's it, everyone?
Okay. Okay.
Greetings from Johannesburg.
Hi. Okay.
How's it, guys?
Okay. I'll be kicking it off. Normally, for all the participants, I'll always ask that you mute and also switch off your cameras, just so that we have many people joining in from many different countries. And I know we've had this in the past where we have challenges with the video just bandwidth. So the least people are on there, the more stable it tends to be. Welcome to the Data Science for Social Impact seminar series, which is Data Science for Society, as we've kind of named it. Today is a very great day as we get to discuss the Lacuna Fund, and also specifically today look at the NLP RFP that is out. Just for housekeeping, I've already talked about the just switching off your videos, your cameras. There will be a couple of the people who are hosting who will keep theirs on. The other thing just to note is that these talks are recorded, so you will see we do record, and that's part of this series, and we'll make the recording available for people who need to watch again. Then yeah, I wanted before we begin is also to note that given that we're talking about natural language processing and also African natural language processing, we will be hosting an unconference between a couple of myself and great collaborators across the continent. We'll be hosting an unconference on the 10th, which is next Saturday, not tomorrow, on there. And I've just put the link on there. I will put it back in at the end of the seminar today. Today on the seminar itself, it's obviously myself. We will also have the Meridian team who are here and are holding it down, and they'll be the ones who are also co-hosting this seminar. And we also then have Phoebe Divet, who will be representing the kind of technical advisory panel for the NLP RFP. I will quickly, let me just share my screen. We'll be going through what is the Lacuna Fund. On my side, just for clarity, I'm on the steering committee of the Lacuna Fund. I'm not on the technical committee that actually came up with the RFP, but I would like to give you an overview of the Lacuna Fund. So one of the challenges we've had, and there'll be a little bit of kind of ad-libbing here, is we've been going through this time, especially I think over the last 2 or 3 years, of really evaluating where AI is going across the world. And one of the kind of pillars that has been really shaky has been on what data is actually available and how data actually impacts the tools that are built and these systems that we tend to use now almost on a daily basis. And the Lacuna Fund is then really focused on, hey, can we actually come up with better training and evaluation data to build applications that are much that are much more relevant to the use cases that are outside North America and Europe, and in this case, let's say being in Africa. And even if some of that data might exist, sometimes it's outdated or it has some bias inside there. So how do we think about this, and how do we actually then, instead of focusing maybe on the model building, we focus on the data that goes into these pipelines, right? So a lacuna, in terms of coming up with the name, is this gap or missing portion, right, of a manuscript. So how then do we fill in for these places that are really not represented and not and really put that blind spot in AI, right? So Lacuna Fund mobilizes labeled datasets that solve urgent problems in low and middle income contexts globally. In a way, so we can think about some of the other things is the global south, but then low and middle income context kind of globally. The structure, we have a steering committee. I sit on that, so that's giving strategic guidance of the fund itself. There's a technical advisory panels. As I said before, Phoebe is joining us today on the TAP for NLP, and they come up with the RFPs and the proposal selection itself. Then there's a secretariat for the facilitation, communication, and logistics, and I've been very thankful to Meridian for all the work they've been doing in getting really this going. The founding funders, in this case, it is funded through different organizations, one being the Rockefeller Foundation, Google.org, IDRC, the German kind of Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, and Fair Forward. The principles of this, as we're building up this data, accessibility, equity, ethics, being participatory, having a participatory approach, quality in the work that's being done, and really trying to get to that transformational impact, right? The Lacuna Fund then supports the creation, the expansion, maintenance of data sets that allow machine learning tools to kind of better tackle these urgent problems in these low and middle income contexts, right? The data sets, this is very important because having talked to some people who've reached out and asking about about the Lacuna Fund, when we were thinking about this strategically, is that the data sets have to be openly licensed, right? Very limited exceptions that people can use them. It's not just funding that then ends up with more kind of very commercial data sets that still people have to get pay for to get into. We also need to follow ethics and privacy best practices. A lot of time in a lot of things, data is about people, and we should actually really respect people and respect that data. They should be locally developed, these data sets, and owned, and be of interest to the machine learning communities broadly, right? So address multiple problems in a way. The fund uses an open solicitation process that releases these requests for proposals in different domain areas. Currently, there's 3: agriculture, language, and health. And Lacuna Fund only funds the dataset creation, expansion, or maintenance. We know there's a bigger pipeline when you look at end-to-end machine learning, but Lacuna Fund has identified then this part that needs to be held up on that. The steering committee, with the support of the Secretariat and the input data science communities, determines the domain areas. Then within that domain area, there's a technical advisory panel we've talked about. And then this panel figures out what the priority needs are for now. And then they author this purpose and needs sections of the RFP. Applicants make a compelling case for a data set and what applications then it will enable, right? You apply, and then from there it's evaluated, and from there it also gives the kind of this focus that is going to be on there. So from my side, as I said, again, I'm very happy we are at this point with the Lacuna Fund, and I will hand it over to Seth and team to take this all up, the rest of today's seminar as they go through the NLP RFP. So thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Bukosi, for that lightning round introduction. Welcome for those folks who are joining in the middle of the presentation to this seminar. One other housekeeping note is, as we move through, I think in a moment we're going to move straight into a presentation of the RFP. And you should feel free at any point to put questions in the chat box that you can find down at the bottom of your screen, and we'll sort of be consolidating those and getting ready to answer them at the end of the seminar. So just a little bit about how the rest of the seminar is going to go. We started off with a quick introduction to Lacuna Fund, and then in just a moment, Phoebe DeVet is going to present a bit about the RFP, and then the vast majority of the time today is reserved for question and answer and discussion. And so we'll have most of the time to take questions and really try to clarify any questions that folks have about the RFP and sort of the process as a whole. And then if we have time towards the end of the seminar, we can spend some time on a more general discussion on needs in the NLP space if folks feel that's helpful to sharpen some thinking related to proposals. So with that, and any general questions about the Lacuna Fund, feel free to put them in the chat. And I see folks are starting to do that, and we will answer them after Phoebe's presentation. And so with that, I want to hand it over to Phoebe, and I'll let you introduce yourself and then tell us a bit about the RFP. And before then, I also wanted to recognize that we have a few folks Also from the technical advisory panel, I see Ignatius on, and I see Matthew Smith on from the steering committee, and anybody feel free to, during the question and answer, jump in at any time as we try to give sort of the best information about the fund. So Phoebe, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Seth. Thank you for the introduction. Is my screen shared?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. Then, as Seth has already mentioned, I'll be talking about the RFP for the NLP data on behalf of the Technical Advisory Panel. The panel had a few meetings and as a team effort came up with what is currently specified in the RFP. Maybe just as a disclaimer, I think the one thing I discovered during lockdown is that I really hate speaking to my laptop screen. So I'm trying to get better at it, but please bear with me. I think for all of us, this is a new phase of skill development. Okay, so the first question that comes to mind is why fund in language? And I think if you're at this meeting this afternoon, then I'm probably preaching to the converted if I'm trying to convince you that it's important to invest money in language, because you are already here and it shows that you have an interest in language. But maybe just as a way of background, when I started working in the field of automatic speech recognition, it really only still consisted in the realm of science fiction. And if you didn't know the Computer from Space Odyssey or Star Trek, HAL, I think is the one from Space Odyssey, then it was really difficult to explain to people around me what I was working on and why on earth I was interested in working on it to start with. So at least, you know, there were these science fiction people that you could refer to by means of explanation. Okay, but that has changed quite drastically. And the next slide is not sponsored by anybody in particular, but it's just to show or to illustrate that language and speech technology now has almost become ubiquitous. A few years ago, you could imagine yourself going to your psychiatrist and saying that you had a burning need to speak to your toaster, and your psychiatrist probably said, well, if you want to speak to your toaster, that's fine, but when your toaster starts speaking back to you, please come and speak to me again. And now also that situation has changed. So many devices ranging from fridges to freezers to whatever you can think of have a voice capability, and you can now use your voice to request a service or to do a query or to whatever it is that you want to use your voice for. And a lot of the change, a lot of the progress has been enabled by advances in deep learning. Even as recently as 5 or 7 years ago, many of the things that people are taking for granted today were not possible. So it's a fairly recent development, and maybe I'm giving away my age by saying that, but maybe just as a reminder. However, and this is quite a big however, while it is true that language technologies contribute to promoting multilingualism and linguistic diversity around the world, only a very small number of the over 7,000 languages of the world are represented in the rapidly evolving language technologies and applications. And many people have made that statement. I've chosen here to take a quote from the paper by Yoshi et al. That was published earlier this year. They're a team from Microsoft India, where they really look at what is available in which languages. So while it's true that these technologies have become ubiquitous, it's also true that they're not equally ubiquitous in all of the world's languages. So for me personally, I think inclusion in a digital future is important, and that inclusion seems to be guided by how digitally prepared languages are. And then a topic that for me personally is very important is access to enabling and assistive technology. And I really think that that should be available in as many as possible languages. So maybe just to conclude that point, a quote from a South African person you may know better than you know me. Nelson Mandela said, if you talk to a man in a language that he understands, that goes to his head. But if you talk to him in his language, it goes to his heart. And I really strongly believe that whatever technology is available should be available in the language of people's hearts and not just their heads. So what do we hope to achieve by the RFP? We're really hoping for proposals that propose transformative data sets and that address the common needs and move NLP in Africa forward in the most general sense of the word. And really what the RFP is asking is that you, whoever is out there and whoever is thinking of submitting a proposal, will tell us in this sense, the technical advisory panel, the secretariat, Meridian, and so on. You must tell us what the data set is that you see a need for, and then motivate why you are the team who should be building this data set. And we would also like to know how you will go about to deliver a quality product and who's likely to benefit from. So that's the long and the short of the RFP. Some details will follow in the next data slides. In the next slide. So as Vukosi has already mentioned, the main aim of the fund is on development data sets. There's no funding for end-to-end solutions. You should really, when you are working on the proposal, see yourself as a representative of a community, and whatever data set it is you're proposing should benefit the community as a whole, not just one group of people or one specific project. You are free to use the data for whatever application or downstream uses, but the emphasis of the funding is really on the data set development. So who's eligible, who may apply? There is a list in the RFP, but I'll just go through that with you. Applicants should be non-profits, research institutions, or for-profit organizations, but what is important is that the mission of the applicant should be related to social good in one way or another. And another important point is that Meridian will only interface with one lead applicant. There won't be contracts with multiple parties. If it is a team effort between various organizations or groups, then sorting out team dynamics is up to the team. There will be only Meridian will only be interfacing with the lead applicant. And then applicants should be either headquartered in Africa or have a substantial partnership with one or more organizations that are headquartered in Africa. And very importantly, should have the expertise that's required to execute the project, and also the team strength, if I can say it, that to obtain national approval. So we're not going to fund anything that's against the law in your country of residence or wherever it is that the organization is headquartered. What are we funding? So as I mentioned in the beginning, the technical advisory panel had a number of meetings and identified a couple of needs, the usual suspects that you may see on most NLP menus. Speech corpora for automatic speech recognition and TTS development, labeled and unlabeled text corpora that can be used as training data for language models, spell checking, whatever application it is that you have in mind. Parallel corpora for machine translation, those can be either text or speech corpora, but if it's a speech corpus, the speech must be transcribed. Corpora to support fundamental NLP tasks, but also corpora that can be used for downstream NLP tasks. The spell checking example, for instance, that I mentioned. And then another need that we identified is to improve the performance of NLP tasks on code switched text or speech. And I think given the language diversity in Africa, in many countries in Africa, code switching is something that many of you will be familiar with. Additional needs that were identified were augmenting existing data sets in all areas so that we could decrease bias if there is bias in existing data sets. and increase the usability of NLP technology and low and middle income contexts. We would also like to see more benchmark data for NLP tasks in underserved languages, so not just the top 10 or the top 20 or even top 100 of the 7,000 global languages, but a much more representative pool of languages, and also to enable the more multilingual models, not just models focused on monolingual development, as is often the case at the moment. What would also be great are innovative data sets, with video or images that are captioned, or any other way in which the relationship between image and text can be captured or is captured in one way or another. There's also domain-specific data required, or even augmentation of existing text and speech data sets, where augmentation can make the data suitable for application in a domain with significant social impact. And then last but not least, if you have a specific idea about the data set that really needs to be developed, and you can motivate what the data set should look like and what you would like to use it for, then you are also welcome to pitch those ideas. How will proposals be selected? He hasn't mentioned a few of these, but I'll just go through what is mentioned in the RFP as well. So first of all, it's important to demonstrate that the team or the individual who's applying has the appropriate qualifications to apply or to conduct the project at least, and that you have knowledge of data quality and the standards that are needed for the data that you want to create, given the use case within which you want to apply the data. The proposal should clearly articulate what gap exists and how this gap will be filled by the data set that you are proposing to create during the course of the project, and what advances in the NLP field will be enabled once this new data set is available. Projects should be completed within 6 to 12 months, and you should take implications of COVID into consideration. Of course, we never know which weird and wonderful virus may show up for Christmas, but within the current limitations, that's the typical project lifespan we're looking at. Budgets between 10,000 US and 50,000 for small and medium projects. But if you're thinking of running a large transformational project, the budget may go up to 250,000 US dollars. When you are preparing the proposal, you should take into consideration that the data you collect is representative and unbiased to the extent that it's possible. And this has also been mentioned before, please ensure that whatever you put in the data set complies with copyright or IP laws for source text, but also for source for speech. If it's not your own data that you are creating or collecting or transcribing during the course of the project, then make sure that you have permission to use the data that you will be packaging as a data set. Proposals should, as far as possible, use existing or common infrastructure and give preference to innovative and cost-effective means to collect and maintain the quality of the data. What is also important for us is that the data is available for other people to use and that it's interoperable with data sets that already exist. So if you are thinking of compiling a data set, then make sure that you know what other data sets are available in that field, how they are packaged, and how can you make your data compatible with what already exists. And then please do make sure that metadata is well described and that it's packaged appropriately with the data set that you deliver in the end. The criteria that the technical advisory panel will use to judge proposals is the quality of the proposed methods. So many of the people on the panel have extensive experience with building corpora, And they'll look at the methods that are proposed. They'll look at the team qualifications, the transformational impact, potential transformational impact of data sets, and the novelty, and not just doing something new for the sake of doing something new, but also if you are doing something new, do you take existing data sets into account, or are you expanding or enhancing? What are you doing with data that's already available in the field? And we'll also consider the equity dimension of the proposed use case. Important is the feasibility of what you are proposing, taking into consideration the budget, the timeline, and the scope. So you have to make it fit into the space that you create with using those three variables. This was already mentioned by Vukosi. Emphasis is on open source data that's as widely and freely available for everybody to use. Very limited exceptions will be made in that regard. You should follow ethics and privacy best practices. Data should be locally developed and owned, and there should be some plan put into place for future sustainability so that the data lives on beyond the 6 to 12 month lifespan of the project. So what next? The application components, firstly, there's the portal. You can only submit through the portal. If you go to the apply page on the Lacuna website, there's a portal, and that's what you should use to apply. The application process, it can be conducted either in English or French, and these are the components of a completed application. First of all, there's an information form that basically asks details like names and numbers and affiliations, those types of details. Then there's the proposal narrative, where you tell us about the data set that you would like to develop, the gap that it's going to fill, and how you see what the potential community is that you see will be served by the availability of the data set. Then there's the budget. There's a budget template available on the portal, but you will also have to write a budget narrative and include a deliverable timeline. There's due diligence self-reporting. If you have no clue what that means, there's an example that's been added to the RFP as an appendix. And then the last bullet refers to the case where you will be using text or speech or whatever it is that has been created or generated by somebody else, and that you would like to annotate and package as a data set. Then you need a letter of support to indicate that you have permission to use existing material as a data source. A quick glance at the timeline. The RFP was released on the 23rd. We are having this discussion today. There's time for questions and answers until the 7th of October. Answers to those questions and answers to the questions will be posted on the 14th, and then completed proposals are due by the 6th of November. Then our part of the work starts to go through all the proposals, and we hope to give feedback by early December so that everybody can start working towards the end of this year or early next year, and hopefully the first data sets will be available 6 months after the RFP was released in September. Details on all the things that I've been saying are available in the RFP. Please check the RFP if you have any questions, if you'd like to clarify things. It is available on the website. And then also to alert you to upcoming opportunities, the fund anticipates releasing additional RFPs that will be towards the beginning of next year. And if you want to stay informed, you want to be notified of upcoming opportunities, then please join the newsletter on the website and you'll be notified when future RFPs are released. So I think it's time for questions.
Great, thank you, Phoebe. And I see that we've been getting a steady stream of questions in the chat as we've been going. So I'll try to pick out and answer a few together that are related to questions about eligibility and partnerships. And then we have a few more substantive questions, and I'll turn towards Phoebe, you, and Vukosi, and any others who'd like to add. So thanks. And yeah, just as a reminder to folks, try to keep mics muted while we go through the questions if possible. So quickly on eligibility, one of the first questions that came up was about, there's been a few questions about applications from institutions in Africa and how that's seen, and a question about an organization in Tunisia. And to address that question, yes, you're welcome to apply as a lead applicant, but note that the RFP is focused on languages in sub-Saharan Africa, so that the content of the proposal should be addressing, primarily a data set that would be relevant to those languages. And somebody had asked about EU-US institution and sort of weighting African versus EU-US lead applicants. We both recognize that, especially for multi-country proposals, there can be difficulties in moving funds within countries. And so for both logistical and team strength reasons, I think we welcome both proposals, as we said, from institutions headquartered in Africa and partnerships. In terms of what a substantial partnership means, that is the Lacuna Fund, as Vukosi noted, has a really strong emphasis on a participatory approach. And so I think just consider whether the partnership is ensuring that all institutions are fully engaged in both the actual doing of the work and any knowledge or benefits that might accrue from it. And I think that there is no hard and fast definition of a substantial partnership, but that's something that the TAP will be looking for. I wanted to also briefly address some questions about multiple submissions, lead applicants, multiple data sets. Each proposal should be for only one data set. Applicants are welcome to submit multiple proposals, but in doing so, in the qualifications section, you should make it clear that you have the capacity, if you were selected, to actually conduct multiple proposals worth of work. I think that'll be important for us and for the technical advisory panel to see. And likewise, institutions can be included as a collaborator on more than one proposal, or from one institution, multiple researchers may submit proposals. So I wanted to start off there. And if I missed anything on the eligibility front, please feel free to just re-add your question in the chat. And before we go further, I should mention that all of these questions will be compiled and also included in the written Q&A that will be released on the 14th that the TAP looks over. So we appreciate all the questions, and we'll work to get to them all today. The one question that I think a few folks had also asked is what constitutes a transformative data set? And I wanted actually here to turn to Vukosi and get some of your thoughts, and then Phoebe as well, if you had thoughts to jump in on what that distinction is between small, medium, and transformational.
Yeah, thank you for that, Seth. In terms of transformation, I think it's, yes, I think the question coming up is on one part trying to get clarity, but at the same time, we're trying to strategically think about how we change the situation in itself, that we don't have these data sets out there. So we do understand that collecting a data set, annotating and making it available is not just a simple process in just getting people, and then some people might do some translation or doing text to speech, speech to text or things like that. So when you think about transformative, is really thinking about how the creation of that data set will get some of this unstuck, right? It will change the way that people think even about, let's say, NLP within a specific area. My view, this is not the Lacuna Fund or thing, is almost like going, if you get to a point where you release, you work on a data set, and through that, it also educates other people who might be the people who actually, create the content, to see why actually doing the digitization can assist with the future of these machine learning algorithms. So if you get to a point where it gets released, that it changes that's one. And then the other one, obviously, that it actually then changes what we believe about the data sets in machine learning in that way. So it will be localized. What transformative means is not universal. It will be kind of, you will make your case for in your community what it actually might mean. But I'll also be very interested to see, I guess, what the other people from the Lacuna Fund also think. Yeah.
Yeah, Phoebe, do you have anything you'd add there?
Well, I think for me, it's important that some of the basic capabilities that we've come to accept for international languages become available in more local languages. So transformative to me means anything that enables that for a language for which the capability doesn't exist at the moment. And between small, medium and large projects, I think, as Vukosi has also pointed out, to collect the data set, to annotate it, to package it properly is not a trivial process. So a small niche project, for instance, would be to capture a few audio recordings in a specific language. Of course, you have to think about how you will capture it, what will you use to elicit prompts, and so on and so forth. But if you're thinking of doing multiple languages and doing translations and employing many people in the process, that goes towards the higher end. I mean, to me, that would be a big, a large transformative project.
Thanks. No, and I think we'll also, that's a really important question. And as I mentioned, all of these questions will also be rolled into written answers that will be released on the 14th. One last quick note. Some of these questions, I know one person asked about evaluation criteria, are included in the RFP that will circulate after the call, after the meeting here, and I would encourage folks to read that carefully as well, since those will be the evaluation criteria used to judge proposals. One thing I wanted to mention that's related to this conversation of transformational work is that we do welcome multilingual data sets. And that, as Phoebe mentioned, is something that, given the coordination and level of effort involved, might fall further towards transformative. And that almost necessitates collaboration. And we understand the importance of that, and sometimes that there can be additional costs associated with that. On the question of lead applicants, I think it is important for us, and in the Your Information portion of the application portal, there's a space to upload CVs. It's important for the technical advisory panel to understand your team's expertise. The lead researcher is more of a administrative, potentially, designation, but it's important to us to understand that your team has the ability to get the project done in a high quality way. We also really welcome collaboration with linguists, with folks who've been responsible for producing text in that language, obviously speakers of that language, whether that be radio stations, newspapers. We welcome those collaborations, understanding that a lot of existing data is potentially housed within those organizations. And as a reminder, if you work with those organizations with source text or speech whose licensing isn't clear, the application does require a letter of support. I saw a question about national approvals and a question about ethical approval. We understand that conducting research in certain countries requires approval of relevant national entities. And so in that case, approval is not required at the time of proposal, but what we would like to see is that you're aware that that approval exists and is needed. And we don't get to the point where a group is beginning a project and we have to backtrack and wait 6 months because of a national approval. So I think it's just awareness of relevant processes in any country where the work is going to take place. And the same is true of considering ethical issues, that does not need to be fully completed at the time of proposal, but an awareness of potential ethical issues, how they might be addressed in any institutional or national processes that you would need to follow is important for the TAP to understand. I wanted to come back to an early question from I think Ernest about maintenance of the data sets beyond the grant period. And this is, you know, to be quite honest, a question that we're asking ourselves at, you know, the fund writ large, and I think a question that if we had it solved, we almost wouldn't be here. In terms of hosting, applicants should include, and there's a line item in the budget template, an item potentially for hosting in perpetuity, and that is understood to be a cost. And any ideas that you can include in the proposal for how to incentivize a community to continue to contribute to a data set or continue to maintain it are very welcome and would strengthen a proposal. And you'll see in the evaluation criteria some further notes about sustainability. Phoebe, Vukosi, others, anything you might add about sustainability and maintenance of data sets?
Sure. Yes, so thinking this strategically, not specifically for the NLP RFP, we had many conversations on how we can direct the participants in these future calls on using like storage, especially if you're going to do more Creative Commons or like open source data that's available. There are services that can be used to make sure that the data sets actually are available and archived properly in a way. It's not, hopefully to be corrected, Lacuna Fund will not be providing the infrastructure, but it will be guiding participants to use infrastructure that is widely available for people to store data sets and make sure that the metadata is put in correctly and stored in a way that other people then can tap into.
Thanks. And the one thing I would add is part of the reason that we are not, Lacuna Fund itself does not host the data sets is because the eventual, the person who creates the team who creates the data set will be the owner of that data set and release it under an open license. And so we want to give the flexibility, whether it's, you know, through one of sort of the solutions that Vukosi mentioned, a common sort of corpus hosting site, to do it in a way that makes sense for the people who you think need to use the data.
I think what we would like to ensure, though, is that data doesn't disappear after the end of the project. That's really a big priority. We know that this is it's a big task to create a good data set. Once it's been created, we would like to keep it alive and make sure that it's available for as many people as possible to use.
And another question that came in was on developing sort of QA/QC and developing sample models as proof of concept, since the Lacuna Fund doesn't fund end-to-end solutions. And one note here is that, and Phoebe, feel free to jump in, is that the TAP did discuss the importance of transfer and semi-supervised learning and working to create amounts of unlabeled data that can be used to build, especially machine translation models. And so building models with the explicit aim of creating a data set can be included in the proposal, and there's more about that in the RFP. And applicants should also include funds to ensure that they have time to create sort of well-described metadata and a usable data set. Beyond that, we'll answer this question as well with the advice of the full tap and the Q&A. We're unable to fund model development. Are there other questions or questions that we didn't quite make it to in that lightning round? And feel free to put them in the chat. One thing I would add is that international organizations are welcome to apply. And for example, if that international organization were not headquartered in Africa, it would be in a partnership with such an organization. But international organizations and public or quasi-public entities are welcome to apply. And I see a question about the total pool and how many projects we're looking to fund. Unfortunately, I think we're unable to answer that. I think the pool is somewhat variable, and the number of projects funded will be dependent on the quality of proposals. I know that we'll be aiming to fund a range sort of projects across geographies and scales, and there's no preference towards any one or the other size of project or geography of project. And then on the size of data sets, so the proposal narrative asks to applicants to discuss the data set in the context of the use cases that it might be suited for. And so I think proposals should make clear the size of the data set that's necessary to complete a certain use case, and that might dictate the data set that you propose. Phoebe, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes, I mean, as somebody in machine learning, you always want to go back to the proverb that says there's no data like more data, but of course, I think the duration of the project already poses some limits. There's, you know, only that much that you can do in 6 months or 12 months. From the advisory panel point of view, I think we would like to make sure that there's good value for money. You know, we can't pay $10,000 for 2 sentences translated from one language into another, but it's such a difficult question to answer generally. And I think Seth's guideline of trying to motivate the size of the data set in terms of the use case that you're proposing is probably the most helpful.
Thanks, Phoebe. And on I see a question, can a proposal address multiple data sets, for example, if they are related? I think we'll discuss this with the technical advisory panel and answer it in the written Q&A, since I can see arguments both for and against. So I guess we'll get back to you. And Paul Rayson, in regards to your question, you do not need to nominate reviewers in the proposal form. And if folks are interested, that who is on the technical advisory panel is available on the Lacuna Fund website. We do ask that you direct questions to the Secretariat only, but you can find those people and get an idea of who the reviewers will be. And the steering committee and other partners may also serve as reviewers, but you do not need to nominate. I had a few questions about both NGOs and international organizations with country programs. We'll work with the TAP to provide a conclusive answer in the written Q&A. But in the agriculture call, I think it was helpful for the technical advisory panel to see groups with independent potentially directors and where sort of the benefits of the work would really accrue to the branches of the organization that were on the African continent. But we'll provide further details on that in the written Q&A as well. Other questions, or Phoebe, anything to add on this last round?
Maybe a quick remark from personal experience. I do think projects that incorporate more than one type of data set or more than one language, of course, those are challenging and interesting projects. But it is often a bit harder than it seems. If you're doing language collection in one language, it's not just 5 or 6 times the effort to do it for more languages. We have done a number of projects in South Africa where we have 11 official languages. And it's not like you design a tool and then you just turn it, you crank it up 11 times and the job is done. Each language has very specific characteristics and intricacies that you have to take into account. So not to dampen anybody's enthusiasm, but those projects that look at more than one type of data or more than one language simultaneously can become quite complex.
Great, thank you. And I think with that, we're nearing the end of our time. As a quick reminder about next steps, we will send it to those who joined the meeting and joined the newsletter, but the RFP remains really the authoritative source of information about the call. And the technical advisory panel, as Phoebe mentioned, spent a lot of time ensuring that it reflects what we hope the RFP will achieve. And so please do read it carefully and get into the application portal early and take a look at the various requirements, including the budget and timeline, just so there's no last minute surprises. You're welcome to submit questions to, and we'll include this in the email as well, and it's in the RFP, to secretariat@lacunafund.org until the end of the day, wherever you are, on October 7th. And those questions will be de-identified and answered publicly by October 14th on our website. And I would just, one note is that we, in the written Q&A, are somewhat unable to provide feedback on individual ideas for proposals, and we do tend to receive some of those questions. I think on that note, if folks have any last questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or otherwise, Vukosi, is there anything that you would want to say either about the RFP or more broadly by way of closing?
Yeah, look, I think for everybody, the reason I personally joined the SteerCo was this is an opportunity that we have currently. It's at a specific time. And for me today, seeing close to 80 people being on a call like this would have been unimaginable about a year ago. Going through actually trying to figure out, I think in this case, we're in this together. We're all trying to work and trying to see what we can produce. I am looking forward to seeing 18 months from now how things will look like. And for that, I'm very, very thankful and appreciative of everybody who's here. It's not just we're all working together in this space, and then we know that there's more people out there who are also trying to come up with ideas, and they also have had ideas for a while, and on there. So in general, do keep working with people and trying to see what's the best way. And I think focus seems to be the thing we want to go for. in a way. Again, more speaking on more experience as a researcher, that you want to have something that's very clearly defined, something that's very focused, and you can go for and actually get done. We all like ambition, but that ambition must also kind of have a way that even if it does fall over, we learn something through it in a way. On my side, just to maybe close off, I wanted to say thanks for all the participants. Thanks for Meridian. Thanks for all the TAP members who came in today. Also, I saw some of the other steering committee members on this part. For myself, we host these Data Science for Society seminars. They've been going through different topics throughout this part of the year. We do it in every second half of the year. So very thankful for Lacuna Fund today for making the time. Just for FYI, the time zones are crazy because in some places, some people, it's really, the sun has just been coming up in the morning, and in some places it's going down. So I'm very thankful for that. If you are interested in just keeping up with the seminars that we do host, you can sign up to this is for the Data Science for Social Impact Research Group. I did mention earlier that we do also have an unconference, Africa NLP unconference, that's happening next week, Saturday. So this is more, again, to have more discussions for people to find other like-minded people. There was not really a direct room, for example, that we had thought that could be for things like looking for funding, but we have a feeling that in the unconference there's going to be this topic that comes up on how to form consortia and and work with other people kind of on there. So thank you. You will just get one email that just I'll talk to, in this case, the Lacuna Fund and Meridian about seeing if we can just put this video up. We normally put the videos up on YouTube, but it has been mentioned that there will be a response to the questions that have come up, and we'll put them in the FAQ, but we will work to just package the video and make it available in some way for people then to be able to look back and check and go on there. So for me, that's pretty much it. I don't know, Seth, if you have any closing words from your side?
No, I think that covers it. We're incredibly excited to see what proposals come in, and we're even more excited to see how folks will use the data sets that come out of this effort. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good afternoon, morning, weekend, wherever you are.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
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 Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Odabo, Odabo, Odiba.